Good morning to all of you. Thank you for joining ACER's workshop on the ACER decisions on the SAP cost sharing, CIDM and FRC pertaining to the forward capacity allocation regulation. My name is Thomas Kawam, and today I will be presenting together with my colleagues Martin and Zoran. And here is the agenda for today's workshop. So we'll start with the introductory remarks, the pragmatical elements of this workshop. Then we'll dive into the background and the process for the ACER decisions that I just mentioned. We'll then dive into the content of those methodologies, starting with the SAP, the single allocation platform. And then we will have a Q&A aiming at answering your questions on the two first agenda sections of the meeting, so the introduction and the SAP methodology. We then have a second content part where we will dive into the two other methodologies, the congestion income distribution methodology and the firmness and remuneration cost methodology. Another Q&A session will follow, and we will close the meeting afterwards. So to start with the interactions during the meeting, the objective of this workshop is to have interactions with the participants. We invite you to use Slido to ask your questions and interact with the presenters. So to connect to Slido, you have several possibilities. Either you can directly connect through Microsoft Teams. You can see on the bar on the top of your screen a small S. You can click on it to access the tool. Either through the website of Slido, you have a direct link, or you have a QR code that you can use with your smartphone. And we will use Slido for questions. So do not use the Teams, Microsoft Teams chat to ask your questions. Please use Slido. You have labels. You will see it should be rather intuitive. And you can also like the other questions, and we will try to ask the questions and answer them in the order of preference. So feel free also to comment, to reply on all the questions. This will make the discussion more interactive. So again, here you have the different ways to access Slido that are made available. So either directly through Teams, through the website, or through the QR code that is on the screen. Another important element, the workshop is recorded, and the presentations together with the recording will be made available on ACER's website after the workshop. We now start with the background and the process for the ACER decisions that I already mentioned at the beginning of the call. We are here speaking about 3 decisions regarding 3 proposals from amendments that were submitted by the TSOs on 28 September 2022 that are regarding the FCA methodologies. The first one is the establishment of the single allocation platform, or the SAP, as we call it, pertaining to Article 49 of the FCA regulation, and the cost sharing methodology pertaining to Article 59. And those 2 articles, or the 2 elements of this methodology, form a single SAP methodology. We then have the congestion income distribution methodology described in Article 57 of the regulation, and then the methodology for sharing costs incurred to ensure firmness and remuneration of long-term transmission rights, the FRC methodology that is described in Article 61. These methodologies, together with others, we can mention the harmonized allocation rule, or the HAR, are requirements for implementing so-called long-term flow-based allocation, which is a requirement or a prerequisite for implementing the core and Nordic capacity calculation methodologies in accordance with the Article 10 of the FCA regulation. And that's the reason why those amendments were submitted, for implementing or allowing for a long-term flow-based allocation, and those amendment proposals were submitted upon ACER request for amendment dating from July 2021. And in March 2023, we expect the submission of the amendment proposal for considering the long-term flow-based in the harmonized allocation rule. So it will come in a further step, and there will be another decision process that will start once the proposal for amendment is submitted by the TSOs. Looking at the planning, we received the submission from the TSOs on 28 September, which started the process. On 26 October, we initiated the procedure. We issued a public notice. We started a public consultation. The public workshop today, 17 November, is part of the process, part of supporting the public consultation, aiming at presenting the content of the proposal for amendments and allowing you to ask questions. And the public consultation will end on 23 November, after which we will enter into the next step of the decision process with the hearing phase, during which TSOs and NRAs will be heard. That will start end of December until mid of January. And then the process will be kept within NRAs and ACER with the electricity working group endorsement phase that will start end of January until early February. And we target a submission or a decision by the Board of Regulator on 22 February next year. I also added the legal deadline on the slides. We have a legal deadline of 6 months to take a decision, but as said, we aim at taking the decision already in the Board of Regulator session of the 22 February next year. So this was it for the background and process. I will now give the floor to my colleague Zoran regarding the single allocation platform presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. So regarding the single allocation platform methodology, the SAP methodology was initially approved by all NRAs in 2017. Then we had an intermediate decision, 9/2022, by ACER, which extended the application of the methodology to other TSOs such as FinGrid. So at that time, ACER did not make extensive content review from its side. So that's something that we are about to do now with the new proposal. So the SAP proposal lays down the functional requirements, governance, liabilities, and co-sharing methodology for the single allocation platform. You could have seen the TSO's amendments on the SAP proposal within the documents for the public consultation. Briefly to mention them here, this is the history of summarizing the previous regulatory approvals in the whereas part. Then the specification of scope of application of the methodology in Article 1. Among the definitions, there are additional definitions of allocation and external constraints in Article 2, and a small adaptation of scope and description of sub users group in Article 13a. The most important additions and changes, which are actually the main reasons for amending the methodologies, is to accommodate the long-term flow-based capacity allocation. So we have a new Article 39 with allocation algorithm formulas for flow-based approaches, but also some revisions for the previously provided NTC-based approach. And there is a new annex providing a common set of requirements for the long-term flow-based allocation. So from ACER's side, and upon our initial check of the SAP proposal, we would say that we largely agree with the proposed principles for the long-term flow-based allocation algorithm. There are a few details on the next slides I'm going to provide. However, we would further revise the certain aspects of proposed principles. There are no tremendous changes foreseen from our side. More format like alignment of CNTC and flow-based formulas. Then perhaps better to address evolved flow-based with some more details. Then also to revise these definitions of allocation and external constraints, also to align them with other documents and legislation. We might also review, where necessary, other aspects of the SAP proposal, such as data provision, governance, perhaps not too much interesting for the market participants at this stage. Also, we will work a bit more on the clarity and structure of the SAP proposal, editorial changes, and we already started integrating the annex with requirements for flow-based allocation into the main articles of the methodology. A few details about the long-term flow-based allocation algorithm. So the objective is to maximize the economic surplus. That means sum per bits of bid prices and times accepted bid volumes under the constraints that flow at each critical network element with contingency, calculated as accepted bit volumes times positive PTDFs, so no netting or counterflows, needs to be lower than the RAM on that CNEC. There is another constraint. If the external constraint is defined on certain for certain net position of a certain bidding zone, the total allocated capacity from or to that zone needs to be lower or equal than this external constraint. Some details about the calculation of clearing prices per border in this flow-based manner. This is sum per CNEX with dual value times positive PTDFs. Dual value means the shadow price at the congested CNEX. This is how there will be from one, let's say, multilateral flow-based auction, the clearing prices per each bidding zone border will be determined in this way. And then one of the ways how to collect the total, calculate the total congestion revenue is sum per borders of clearing prices times the accepted bid volumes. Now, this is one busy slide. I'm not going to present it here in detail, just whatever I mentioned in the previous slide is provided also here through, I would say, I think quite sound numerical example with dummy values. So for those who want to dive a bit more deeper into the topic and to check how this would really look like in practice, feel free to use this, and it will be part of the materials that we are going to provide. So you have here the example of CNEX and dual values and the RAM values and the PTDF values. For example, on a border CHEPS APG, you can see the PTDF values and calculation of hourly and yearly clearing prices, accepted bids, two ways how to calculate congestion revenue here. And then again, all this presented on this single border as an example, also showing consumer and producer surplus and total economic surplus and congestion revenue together with the graphics. So I would skip further explanations here, but feel free to come back with any questions you might have regarding these principles. So for the consultation questions on the SAP, we considered that there are possible impacts of market participants by the SAP, less than this would be with the HR methodology, which will be consulted separately, but some functional requirements which are defined in the SAP proposal may have implications on the HAR and therefore on market participants. So just to remind here on consultation questions, do you have any comments on the proposed requirements for the long-term allocation algorithm? And do you have any other comments on regarding the SAP proposal? So you do not have to answer them now, just if you need some further clarification currently, you can ask, and then you can reply to these questions in the public consultation process separately. And these would be my slides. So I would now open the Q&A session. Any questions? Maybe.
Yeah, maybe Zoran from my side. There was one question which was on the consultation of the HAR, which was answered, I think. So that was all the questions. I don't have anything else for the moment. I don't know if there's anything popping up, but maybe not. Maybe there's a question coming. Yeah. So a question by Hélène Robert from Electoral says, how will the issue of the collateral raised by Yao be addressed? Is that for you, or is that later?
Maybe I can follow up on this. So this will be also rather something for the harmonized allocation rules, since it's handled there. I mean, as mentioned in the chat, GSOs will have a public consultation on this in December. It will then we will then receive it in March, and we will also hold a public consultation during the course of our decision, which, I mean, just very preliminary, will be around April, May or something. And it will be discussed there. We also discussed it already with NRAs as well. I mean, it's quite a we see it as a very relevant issue, and we are discussing it, but it's not something to be addressed in the single allocation platform methodology, but rather it will be in the HAR, and discussions are ongoing on what we can do, and we acknowledge that this is a very hot issue, let's say, for market participants.
Okay, good. I see another one coming. The question says, we're talking about flow-based allocation. Has there been assessments to demonstrate that the conditions set under Article 10.5 of the FCA regulations are met, I assume, is the question. I don't know, Zoran or Martin? Should I repeat the question?
Yes, please.
The question is, as we are talking about flow-based allocation, has there been assessment to demonstrate that the conditions set under Article 10.5 of the FCA regulations are met? I assume, is this Martin, you know, or?
Yeah. I mean, this is the conditions whether to apply flow-based in a long-term capacity calculation time frame. So I mean, this is not really subject to the single allocation platform, but rather subject to the where we had the decision already on the core long-term capacity calculation methodology, and this was also assessed. And
I could also add, I think that we thoroughly assessed these requirements, and in particular, the last one was for the core long-term capacity calculation methodologies, even with numerical examples and the assessment at that point of time.
Okay. I'm just getting one question on a follow-up, which I don't really understand. Do you agree? And where should this point be addressed? This one or HAR? I assume it's the collateral. It refers to the collateral question. The collateral question is indeed addressed in the.
Maybe we could open the mic for Hélène.
Yeah, maybe that's an idea. Yeah.
Thank you. No, actually, the follow-up does not refer to the collateral, but to the question I put. I see it as the last one, but no problem. Okay. It's not super easy to. Just the box is limited to a limited number of characters, so that's why I had to cut it into two pieces. But the thing is, it's a bit jumping on the point of Arben from IFET. So we had some reservations with regards to the benefits of moving transitioning to flow-based, so taking note of the decision and going forward now, we suggest you have a very close monitoring of the impact of the allocated volume per border, so not the total allocated volume, but really border per border, to see if there are indeed borders that are suffering from very low allocated volumes or not, as we fear, because that's the main fear we have. And so we suggest to impose to make sure that there will be a monitoring. And so the question is where this should be addressed. Should this be referred in the SAP document or in the EUR? And first, do you agree that this monitoring should be done? I hope my question is clear now.
I think it's clear. Well, regarding we had similar discussions during the issuing of the core long-term capacity calculation methodology. We followed the requirements from FCA where we proved that flow-based approach in core would lead to an increase of economic efficiency in the capacity calculation region, and this was really so. Of course, this is not related to border per border issue, and we understand the concerns. There might be borders with only a few megawatts allocated. However, there is a competition between bids, and I would say between bids and not borders in this case. But I see no problem in monitoring the effects on overall and particular efficiency of the flow-based of the flow-based allocation in both core and the Nordics when it takes place. For the proper place where to put such monitoring, I'm not sure if this is a SAP document or HAR. Let's leave us to take this question with us, and we will consider this in our amendments maybe.
Okay, thank you, and we will put that in our consultation response that we would welcome having an article either in the SAP or in the R to make this monitoring mandatory.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe to let you know that we should have solved the character thing. So I think people should be able to write longer questions in the Slido. But I don't have anything else for now. So give it back to the next presenter.
Perfect. Thank you, Mathieu, and thank you, Zoran.
Thank you.
Moving now to the CID methodology. So this is a methodology that is not usually under public consultation for market participants, more related to TSO processes, even though at the end it is linked to the TSO's cost and therefore the tariffs at the end. So we took the opportunity of having the SAP consultation ongoing to also submit them to the participants, but I would tend to think that the presentation is mostly for information here. So the CIDM was initially approved by all NRAs in 2019. Earlier this year, we also took a decision regarding the CIDM, but it was a decision that was purely related to extension of the application of the methodology to other TSOs. There was no content review by ACER in the decision that was taken earlier this year. And here in the CIDM proposal, here are the main amendments proposed by the TSOs. There are additional provisions for context. There is a summary of the previous regulatory approvals. There is a specification of the scope of the application of the methodology, also linking to the previous ACER decision on the extension of the application of the CIDM to other TSOs. We have clarity more now on which TSO should be under the application of the methodology. And then the main part, as introduced, it's about the extension of the provision on the collection and calculation of the congestion income to CCRs that would be applying a flow-based approach. And most of the content is concentrated in one article, the Article 3. And now I will explain shortly what or how this extension to flow-based has been done. So the following approach has been introduced. What will happen is that the sum of the long-term congestion income generated within a CCR will be calculated for every market time unit within the product period of the long-term transmission rights, and it will be calculated as the sum of the congestion incomes generated on each bidding zone border direction of the CCR. So we calculate those congestion income for every direction of the bidding zone borders, and then it's summed at the CCR level. And then we will assign those to every bidding zone border afterward in a further step, but relying on a share of the congestion income calculated with the CIDM congestion income. So we rely on sharing keys that are depending on the day-ahead outcome to distribute the congestion income between the different borders. And on the next slide, I will give an example that will, I hope, illustrate a bit how this works. So you will see on the figure here that we have 3 steps. The first step is the step of the aggregation per CCR. You can see that we have 3 TSOs with 3 bidding zone borders, generating a total long-term congestion income of 500 euros, with the biggest share of those 500 euros starting or issued by the border 1 to 2, for which we have 300 euros. Then in the day-ahead phase, we also have congestion income that is computed, and from the congestion income that is computed in the day-ahead phase, we calculate sharing keys, and those sharing keys will afterward be used in the third step to distribute the long-term congestion income that was generated or aggregated in the first step. So you can see it's a 3-step process, and relying on the day-ahead sharing key for distributing the long-term congestion income on the different bidding zone borders. We also have additional elements that were added in the proposal for amendments, that bidding zone borders within a CCR not issuing long-term transmission rights shall not be considered in this distribution, that external borders shall be considered, that in case of a price convergence across the capacity calculation region, we artificially introduce a market spread of 1 between the different bidding zones, and in case of fallback of the SDAC, the single day-ahead coupling, the long-term congestion income of the decoupled bidding zone borders is not summed up and is assigned considering a NTC approach. So the TSOs have provided explanations to their proposed amendments, and they're detailed on the slides. Within the long-term flow base, there is a need to move away from a distribution based on long-term auction, because what was introduced now would be reflecting the congestions, relying on the day-ahead sharing keys. The proposed principles are harmonized across the day-ahead and the balancing timeframes, and also bidding zone borders without long-term transmission rights have no reason to either collect nor bear costs resulting from the long-term transmission right issuance. After an initial assessment of this proposal within ACER, we largely agree with the suggested approach. We, however, foresee some restructuring and wording changes. For example, looking now at the methodology, we see that most of the content is concentrated in the Article 3. We would like to envisage to spread that across different articles to improve the readability of the methodology, and also to align it with the CIDM methodology. But overall, as said, we largely agree with the approach, and we foresee mostly restructuring and wording changes. I will now hand the floor to my colleague Martin for the last part of the presentation about the FRC methodology. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Thomas, and thanks, Soran. Yeah, similarly to the congestion income distribution methodology, also the methodology for sharing costs for firmness and remuneration of long-term transmission rights is also something with rather negligible impact on, or direct impact on, market participants, maybe rather indirectly through TSOs tariffs. But however, as we consult this on the whole package we received, like of the proposals we received. Also, I will provide you a short overview on what it's about. So the amendments. So we did already approve this methodology with the ACER decision in 2021. And now this proposal for amendments is amending this already approved decision in the whereas, also a little bit in the scope article. And then the main amendments is about the new addition or the addition of an article covering the case of long-term flow-based allocation, and also this current article is now addressed as the scope of a CNTC. And then also one amendment to ensure consistency with the congestion income distribution methodology. Just to give you an overview on what's the approach in this under this new article. So we have the following sequential steps to cover the costs for remunerating long-term transmission rights. This is per market time unit, and the first step is to use the day-ahead congestion income of the whole CCR for the remuneration, while then if there is still remaining costs after this, the long-term congestion income should be used to cover these costs. And if this is still not sufficient for a specific market time unit, the cost will be covered for each bidding zone border and not with a CCR port anymore. And this could be then covered by any other means, let's say. Yes, so also there is a differentiation that if there is a CCR where not all bidding zone borders are issuing long-term transmission rights, only the congestion income from the bidding zone borders where LTTRs are issued are considered. And then also a provision that remuneration costs in case of day-ahead fallback procedures are not socialized. So if that's the case, we go also on a border per border assessment, let's say, or calculation. And just to also, since we had already the FRC proposal or FRC methodology, which was rather limited to the NTC approach, also it's important to mention that these steps are actually following what we already have under this approved CNTC regime, let's say. Yeah, TSOs also explained these and reasoned why they have these amendments. I mean, there is the big differentiation between core and Nordic CCR in regards of the issuing of LTTRs, and this should also be considered. And the proposed approach of using this CCR steps, CCR pot approach, as well as these different steps are also chosen because it's consistent with what we had in the previous decision, as well as what we have in the congestion income distribution methodology, which was just presented by Thomas. And also, of course, like these revisions on ensuring consistency is also reasoned. All in all, I think I can largely agree. So this is with this suggested approach. So this is our initial view, and also we only consider minor revisions necessary at this point to this methodology. So to give you an overview also on what our public consultation questions on this are, in the end we have 2 open questions on each proposal, like for the 2 proposals. So one open question for the congestion income distribution methodology. If you have any comments there, please provide them. And the same as a separate question on if you have any comments on the firmness remuneration costs proposal. And then we have another open question, but not linked to any proposal, but just general. If you have any further comments, you are invited to also provide them in this question 4, let's say. Okay, then we come to our last Q&A session, and yeah, please, Mathieu, if there's any questions.
I currently only have one, and it's not about the last 2. I have only one question coming back to the SAP proposal, so that seems to have the most attention. The question is that coming back to the SAP, it's not fully clear what ACER considers to revise compared to the TSO proposal. Could you elaborate on this? So on the SAP proposal, that is. Maybe you can flip back to the slide, to the slide showing this. I think we had.
Yes. Okay. Just a second. Okay, so you can see the slide here. So content-wise, we agree with the proposed principles, as we said, so we will not provide tremendous changes in the principles over there. Just we would, in a mathematical formulation, we would align a representation of NTC-based and flow-based formulas, just for it to be easier to understand. Then also there is a evolved flow-based included in the document only through a footnote. We would like to check this and possibly to extend this. After that, there are definitions of allocation and external constraints. We are not maybe comfortable with them. I can hear some noise if
sorry,
it's me. So we have to align the definitions of allocation and external constraint. It seems that TSO in this context considered allocation constraints as the technical profiles for NTCs, and external constraints like net position constraints for the flow-based approach. We see more similarities with this kind of let's say exchange constraints, when we see that allocation constraints can have a wider sense, like losses and other stuff. So we would check these definitions. The rest is the data provision, mainly towards ACER, and some governance issues. We don't have concrete proposals at the moment. And of course, the format and structure of the SAP proposal. That would be the ideas, what to change.
Don't know. It was Helene asking the question. I think she could still unmute. Helene, if there's anything addition.
Yeah, no, I think it's clear. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, then I don't see anything else coming in for now, so I'll give it back to you.
Okay, thanks everyone. I mean, since we don't have any further questions, I guess we could close the workshop. I mean, of course, just to repeat, you're very welcome to share your feedback in the public consultation, which is still open until next Wednesday. And yeah, if you have any further questions, I mean, you could still write us a mail. Otherwise, we really hope for your feedback in our public consultation. The process was also described, also mentioned. The HAR proposal will also be coming quite soon for your feedback in another kind of process, and I think that's the most relevant point for now. And I thank you a lot for your contributions and participations in this workshop. And yeah, thanks a lot, everyone. And bye.
Thank you. Goodbye. Have a nice day.
Thank you. Goodbye.